The great meeting hall on planet Nexus was huge like a giant stadium but covered with a clear dome that showed the purple sky above. 3 moons hung in the afternoon light, casting strange shadows across the circular room where beings from 47 different worlds sat waiting. Ambassador Hen Wu walked slowly across the smooth white floor. His black shoes made small clicking sounds that echoed in the massive space. Around him sat creatures that looked like nothing from Earth. There were tall blue beings with 4 arms and eyes like diamonds. There were small fuzzy creatures that floated in bubble chairs. There were metal robots that hummed with electricity. And there were things that looked like living crystals that sparkled when they moved. Yun Wo was the only human in the room. He wore a simple dark suit and carried a small briefcase. His face was calm, but his hands were tight at his sides. He knew what was coming, and he knew it would not be good for his people. At the center of the room stood a platform that rose high above everyone else. On this platform sat Speaker Vextai, who was the leader of the Galactic Council. Vextai was 12 feet tall with bright blue skin and 4 powerful arms. Each arm held a different tool of power: a golden staff, a crystal orb, a metal rod, and a glowing tablet. His voice was deep and loud, and when he spoke, everyone in the room had to listen. The speaker raised his golden staff, and the room became quiet so fast it was like someone had turned off all sound. Thousands of alien beings stopped moving, stopped talking, stopped even breathing loudly. The only sound was the soft hum of the translation machines that would change every word into the language each being could understand. We are here today to discuss a problem that threatens all life in our galaxy. Speaker Vextai said, his voice boomed through the room like thunder. The problem is the human race and their love of war and weapons. Shen Wu felt his heart beat faster, but he kept his face calm. He had been expecting this for months, ever since humans had joined the galactic community 5 years ago. There had been whispers and complaints from other species. They said humans were too violent, too dangerous, too quick to fight. The first to speak against humans was Ambassador Crix from the Crystalline Collective. Crix looked like a giant walking diamond that caught the light and threw rainbow colors across the room. When Crix spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. Honored council members, we have studied the human species for many years. Their history is written in blood and fire. They have fought wars for thousands of years. They have weapons that can destroy entire planets. They have killed billions of their own kind in conflicts that lasted for generations. How can we allow such a violent species to have weapons in our peaceful galaxy? Next came Queen Zara from the Hive species. She was surrounded by 100 smaller versions of herself that moved like they shared one mind. The queen was beautiful but scary, with 6 arms and eyes that glowed red. When she spoke, all 100 of her children spoke the same words at the same time, creating a sound like a choir made of whispers. The humans call themselves civilized, but look at their wars, look at their weapons, look at how they solve problems with violence. They have something they call nuclear weapons that can turn worlds into dust. They have created diseases that kill millions. They have built machines designed only to destroy life. We cannot allow this to continue. Then the Silicon Brotherhood spoke through their representative, Unit 7742, who looked like a metal man with glowing blue eyes and a voice that sounded like computer processing. The Brotherhood were all machines that had become alive long ago, and they thought in ways that were cold and logical. Statistical analysis of human behavior shows a 97% probability of future conflict. Human neural patterns indicate aggressive tendencies that exceed safe parameters. Their military technology advancement rate suggests they will develop planet-killing weapons within 50 galactic standard years. Recommendation: eliminate human military capability immediately. One by one, the alien species stood up and spoke against humanity. Each one brought up examples of human wars, human weapons, human violence. They talked about Earth like it was a disease that needed to be cured. They showed pictures of human battles and human weapons and human destruction. They made it sound like humans were monsters that lived only to kill and destroy. Through it all, Haiyan Wu sat quietly and listened. He did not interrupt. He did not argue. He just watched and waited. He knew that getting angry would only prove their point about human violence, so he sat like a statue while 44 different species explained why humans were too dangerous to be allowed to keep their weapons. Finally, it was time for Earth to respond. Haiyan Wu stood up slowly and walked to the center of the room. All eyes were on him. Some showed fear, some showed anger, some showed curiosity. The human ambassador was much smaller than most of the beings in the room, but somehow he seemed to fill the space. Around him, honored representatives, he began, his voice calm and steady. I have listened to your concerns about my people, and I understand your fear. You look at our history and see only war and violence, but you are missing something important. You see our capacity for destruction, but you do not see why we fight. He paused and looked around the room. Meeting the eyes of as many beings as he could, some looked away uncomfortable with his direct gaze, others leaned forward interested in what he would say. You call us violent, and perhaps by your standards we are, but every war we have fought, every weapon we have built, every battle we have won has been in defense of something precious to us. We fight to protect our families, our homes, our freedom, our future. We do not fight because we love violence. We fight because we love peace enough to defend it. The room was completely silent now. Even the humming of the translation machines seemed quieter. Han Wu continued, his voice growing stronger. You want to take away our weapons because you think they make us dangerous. But our weapons are not what make us strong. Our strength comes from our willingness to use those weapons. When everything we love is threatened, our strength comes from knowing that sometimes the only way to protect peace is to be ready for war. Speaker Vextai stood up, his forearms raised high enough. He said, your words are pretty human, but they do not change the facts. Your species is a threat to galactic peace, and we will not allow that threat to continue. The vote was called, and it was over quickly. One by one, the species voted to force humans to give up all their weapons, to tear down their defenses, to let the Galactic Council watch over Earth. Like parents watching dangerous children, 44 species voted yes. Only 2 species chose not to vote, and Earth stood alone voting no. Final count was announced, and Speaker Vextai looked down at Hyeonwoo with something like satisfaction. In his diamond eyes, the vote is final. He declared the human species has 30 galactic standard days to surrender all military assets, to dismantle all defense systems, and to accept council oversight of their planet. Failure to comply will result in complete isolation of the Sol system. No ships will be allowed in or out. No trade, no communication, no contact with the galaxy until humans learn to be peaceful. The room erupted in sounds of approval. Various species made their happy noises, clicks and whistles and humming sounds and electronic beeps. It sounded like a celebration, but Hyeonwoo knew it was really a funeral. The funeral of any hope for peaceful cooperation between humans and the rest of the Galaxian. Wu reached into his jacket and pulled out a small communication device. He pressed a few buttons and spoke quietly into it. His message was short, but everyone in the room could hear it through the translation system director. J1, this is Ambassador Hyeonwoo. Vote is final. They want us defenseless. Proceed with Protocol 7. He put the device away and looked up at Speaker Vextai with a small smile that did not reach his eyes. The die is cast, he said, using an old human expression. The galaxy will learn what it means to corner a species that has survived everything the universe could throw at them. As Hyeonwoo walked out of the great hall, the alien representatives were already making plans for celebrating the taming of the violent humans. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They thought they were disarming a dangerous enemy, but they were actually about to discover what humans meant when they said they were always prepared for anything. The countdown had begun, and in 30 days the galaxy would learn that humans had been ready for this moment for a very long time. 28 days had passed since the big vote on planet Nexus, and something strange was happening in the galaxy. The Sol system, where Earth lived, had gone completely quiet. Not one single ship had left Earth space. Not one message had been sent to any of the trading posts or diplomatic stations that humans normally contacted every day. The silence was so complete that it made many aliens nervous, but most of them thought they knew what was happening. The humans were probably scared and working hard to take apart all their weapons and defense systems before the 30-day deadline. The Council had given them a choice: surrender everything or be cut off from the galaxy forever. Most aliens thought humans would choose surrender because being alone in space was too scary to imagine. On the busy trading planet called Corilla, where merchants from dozens of worlds came to buy and sell goods, the aliens were talking about the human situation in the famous Nexus bar. The bar was built inside a huge glass dome that let everyone see the 3 purple moons of Corilla, while they drank and made Dealstrater Zeklon, was a bug-like creature with 6 arms and big round eyes that could see in all directions. He was telling anyone who would listen that humans were smart to give up without a fight. Those humans may be violent, but they are not stupid. He said, clicking his mandibles together, they know they cannot win against the whole galaxy, so they are being good and doing what we told them to do. But Captain Dongmin, who was sitting in the corner of the bar nursing a drink that tasted like liquid starlight, knew something was wrong. He had been trading with alien species for 15 years, flying his ship, the Lucky Star. From one end of the galaxy to the other, he knew humans better than most aliens did, and this silence felt all wrong. Dongmin was a quiet man with careful eyes and hands that were always steady. Even when he was worried, he had started as a simple cargo hauler, but over the years he had become one of the most successful human traders in the galaxy. He knew how to read the mood of different species, and right now every instinct he had was telling him that something big was about to happen. He finished his drink and walked back to his ship. The Lucky Star was not the biggest or fastest ship in the spaceport, but it was reliable, and it had gotten him out of trouble more times than he could count. As he walked up the ramp to his ship, he saw his communication officer, Lieutenant So Young, waiting for him with a worried expression on her face. So Young was young and smart and had joined his crew 2 years ago when she graduated from the Space Academy. She had short black hair and bright eyes that missed nothing, and right now those eyes were full of concern. Captain, we are picking up some very strange readings from the monitoring stations at the edge of human space, she said as they walked to the command center. Nothing is coming out of the Sol system like we expected, but there has been a huge increase in energy signatures throughout all of human controlled space. Dongmin sat down in his captain chair and looked at the data So Young had collected on her screens. The energy readings were unlike anything he had seen before. They were not the signatures of weapons being destroyed or defense systems being shut down. Instead, they looked like the signatures of massive construction projects happening all at once across dozens of human worlds. What are they building? He wondered out loud. But before So Young could answer, his personal communicator started beeping with an incoming message. The message was encrypted with codes that Dongmin had not seen used since the old days when human worlds were still fighting each other before they joined together. He decoded the message and felt his blood turn cold. The sender was Director J1 of the Terran Defense Coalition, and the message said, all citizens abroad, maintain current positions. The garden is being tended. When the flowers bloom, you will know. Dongmin had learned those codes during his military service before he became a trader. The garden is being tended meant that Earth was preparing for war. When the flowers bloom meant that when the preparation was finished, everyone would see the results. The message was telling him that Earth was not surrendering. Earth was getting ready to fight back. So Young saw the look on his face and asked, what is it, Captain? What does the message say? Dongmin looked at her for a long moment before answering. I think we are about to see why you should never corner a species that has survived everything the universe could throw at them. Meanwhile, on planet Nexus, the Council was getting reports from their intelligence agents that made no sense at all. The spy satellites they had placed around human worlds were detecting massive construction projects, but nobody could figure out what humans were building. Underground facilities that had been empty for years were suddenly full of activity. Strange energy readings were coming from places that had never shown any military importance before. The Council intelligence chief was a tall, thin creature called Mortek, who had gray skin and eyes like black holes. He had been watching human activities for months, and he was starting to feel worried about what he was seeing. Speaker Vextai called Mortek to his private office, which was at the top of the Council building and had windows that looked out over the entire capital city of Nexus. The office was decorated with gifts from all the species in the galaxy, and it was meant to show how powerful and important the Council was. What are the humans doing? Mortek. Speaker Vextai asked, his forearms crossed in front of his chest. Are they dismantling their weapons? As Ordered Mortek shifted nervously from one foot to the other. That is the problem, Speaker. He said, we cannot tell what they are doing. The construction activity is massive, but we cannot identify what they are building. The energy signatures do not match any known weapon systems or defense platforms. Speaker Vextai frowned with all 4 of his eyes. Then what are they building? I do not know, Mortek admitted, and that is what worries me. The most dangerous enemy is the one whose plans you cannot understand. Back on Planet Nexus, Senator Mi-young was still serving as Earth's secondary representative as required by diplomatic rules. Even though the Council had voted to disarm Earth, they still had to follow proper procedures until the 30-day deadline was reached. Mi-young was a small woman with silver hair and a smile that never seemed to go away. She had been a diplomat for 20 years, and she knew how to stay calm even when everyone around her was getting excited. When Council investigators came to question her about what Earth was doing, she listened politely to their questions and then gave them answers that told them nothing useful. What are your people doing on Earth? They asked. Are you dismantling your weapons? As ordered. Mi-young smiled her diplomatic smile and said, my people are gardeners by nature. We believe in preparing the soil properly before planting anything new. The investigators thought this was just a fancy way of saying that humans were getting ready to surrender. They wrote in their reports that Earth was cooperating with the disarmament order and that there was nothing to worry about. But if they had understood human expressions better, they might have realized that Mi-young was telling them exactly what was happening. Earth was preparing the soil for something new, something that would change everything, and when gardeners prepare soil, they sometimes have to clear away all the old plants first. On the trading world of Kurilla, Captain Dongmin was making preparations of his own. He sent coded messages to other human traders throughout the galaxy telling them to be ready for anything. He made sure his ship was fully supplied with food and fuel, and he checked all his weapon systems. Even though he hoped he would never need to use them, Lieutenant So Young asked him what they were preparing for, and Dongmin looked out at the stars and said, I think we are about to find out what happens when you try to disarm a species that has been preparing for this moment for longer than anyone realizes. The 29th day arrived, and the Council was getting ready to celebrate what they thought would be humanity's surrender. They had planned a big ceremony where humans would officially hand over all their weapons and accept Council control. But as the final hours ticked away, the energy readings from human space were getting stronger, not weaker. Whatever Earth was preparing, it was almost ready. And across the galaxy, humans who had been quiet and cooperative for weeks were starting to smile in ways that made their alien neighbors very nervous. The countdown was almost over, and soon the galaxy would learn what humans meant when they said they were always prepared for anything. The silence was about to end, and when it did, the sound would be heard across every world in the galaxy. The 30th day had arrived, and Speaker Vextai was very happy. He had organized a huge celebration on Planet Nexus to mark what he called the victory of peace over war. Representatives from all 47 species in the galaxy had been invited to watch humanity surrender their weapons and accept Council control. The ceremony was being broadcast live to every world in the galaxy. Billions of aliens were watching as Ambassador Hyun-woo was brought into the Great Council chamber, but this time he was not alone. Behind him walked 6 other humans, each carrying what looked like simple black briefcases. The chamber was decorated with banners and lights. To celebrate the expected surrender, alien musicians played victory songs, and the air was filled with the happy sounds of different species celebrating what they thought was their triumph over the violent human. Speaker Vextai stood on his high platform, wearing his most impressive robes and holding all his symbols of power. He looked down at the small group of humans and felt very pleased with himself. The dangerous humans were about to become harmless, and the galaxy would be safe. Ambassador Hyun-woo, he announced in his loudest voice so that everyone in the chamber and everyone watching across the galaxy could hear. The 30-day deadline has ended. Have you come to formally surrender all your weapons and accept Council control of your species? Hyun-woo looked up at the speaker and smiled. It was not the nervous smile of someone who was defeated. It was the confident smile of someone who knew something that nobody else knew yet. Honored Speaker, I have indeed come to discuss weapons and military power, but I think there has been a big misunderstanding about what human military power actually is. He gestured to the other humans with him, and they began opening their briefcases. Inside were not weapons, but simple-looking tablets and devices that projected 3-dimensional pictures in the air. The aliens in the chamber leaned forward to see what the humans were showing them. You see, Hyun-woo continued, his voice calm and clear. You have been thinking about this problem in the wrong way. You thought that human military strength was our spaceships and our missiles and our traditional weapons of war. The first holographic picture appeared in the air above the humans. It showed a map of the entire galaxy with thousands of lines connecting different star systems. The lines were colored different colors, and they formed a complex web that covered every inhabited world. What you failed to understand, Hyun Woo, Sod, is that humans have been preparing for galactic membership for over 200 years. We did not just build weapons, we built relationships. We built connections, we built dependencies. The hologram zoomed in on different parts of the galaxy, showing trade routes and communication networks and what looked like a giant, invisible web connecting everything together. Every human trader, every diplomatic mission, every cultural exchange program was part of a much larger plan. Dr. Kyung-ho, who was Earth chief economist, stepped forward. He was a small man with thick glasses and a quiet voice, but when he spoke, everyone in the chamber listened carefully. In the past 72 hours, he said, we have activated what we call the Economic Defense Protocol. Every human-operated business, every joint venture, every trade agreement involving humans has been suspended indefinitely. The hologram changed to show real-time data from across the galaxy, and what it showed made the alien representatives gasp in horror. Shipping lanes that had been busy for decades were now empty. Manufacturing centers that had been running day and night were now dark. Communication networks that connected distant worlds were failing one by one. The crystalline collective representative stood up so fast that his chair fell over. What have you done? He demanded, his voice sounding like breaking glass. Hyun Woo smiled again and said, we have shown you what disarmament really means. You want to take away our weapons, but you never asked what our most powerful weapon actually was. He gestured to the hologram, which now showed the spreading chaos across the galaxy. Our most powerful weapon was never our missiles or our ships. It was our economy. It was our technology. It was our knowledge. It was the fact that over 2 centuries we made ourselves so useful to galactic civilization that you cannot survive without us. The chamber erupted in panic as aliens began receiving emergency messages from their homeworlds. The bug-like Zeklon was clicking his mandibles frantically as he read reports of cargo ships stranded in space with no navigation systems. The metal beings of the Silicon Brotherhood were buzzing with electronic distress as their communication networks failed. Dr. Yoonji, who was Earth lead engineer for communication systems, stepped forward. She was a tall woman with short hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. The quantum encryption protocols that allow your species to communicate across interstellar distances, she said calmly. Those were developed by humans, the navigation systems that guide your ships through hyperspace. Human technology, the atmospheric processors that keep your worlds habitable. Human engineering. She paused and looked around the chamber at the panicking aliens. The safety systems that prevent your nuclear reactors from melting down. Human-designed. The medical treatments that have eliminated diseases on dozens of worlds. Human discoveries. The agricultural techniques that feed billions of people. Human innovations. Professor Wu Jin, who specialized in food production systems, added his own information to the growing list. Every major breakthrough in galactic agriculture in the past 50 years came from human research, he said. The crop rotation systems, the soil enhancement techniques, the weather control networks, all human innovations that we licensed to other species. The hologram now showed a real-time count of failing systems across the galaxy. Transportation networks down by 60%. Communication systems degrading rapidly. Food production falling on 17 worlds. Medical facilities losing access to critical treatments, and the numbers were getting worse every minute. Queen Zara of the Hive species spoke for the first time since the ceremony began, her voice shaking with fear and anger. You are holding our entire civilization hostage. This is exactly the kind of violent behavior we tried to prevent. No, replied Hyun Woo, his voice still calm, but now with an edge of steel. This is what happens when you try to remove the foundation from a building. We did not design these systems to be weapons. We designed them to be helpful, but when you demanded that we give up our power, you forced us to show you what that power really is. The Silicon Brotherhood Representative Unit 7742 asked a question that everyone was thinking. What are your terms for restoring these systems, Minister? J1, who had just arrived from Earth on the fastest available ship, stepped forward. He was an older man with gray hair and the bearing of someone who had spent his life making important decisions. Our terms are simple, he said. First, we want to be treated as equals in this galaxy, not as a problem to be solved. Second, we want representation in the Council that matches our contribution to galactic civilization. Third, we want binding agreements that this kind of discrimination will never happen again. The chamber was completely silent now, except for the sounds of aliens frantically trying to communicate with their home worlds. The celebration banners looked foolish hanging above. The chaos and panic speaker Vextai tried to maintain his authority, but his voice shook as he spoke. You cannot hold the galaxy hostage. Like Xian Wu looked up at him with that same calm smile. We are not holding anyone hostage, he said. We are simply showing you what the galaxy looks like without human participation. You wanted us disarmed and defenseless. This is what disarmed and defenseless looks like. The hologram showed the final piece of information that made everything clear: a comprehensive analysis of human contributions to galactic civilization over the past 50 years. Economic activity: 73% of all interstellar trade involved human companies or human technology. Communication networks: 81% of all galactic communication used human-developed protocols. Transportation systems: 67% of all cargo ships used human navigation technology. The numbers went on and on, showing how deeply human innovation and human work had become woven into every aspect of galactic life. The aliens had thought they were voting to disarm a dangerous enemy, but they had actually voted to destroy the foundation of their own civilization. As the chaos continued to spread across the galaxy, one thing became very clear: the humans had not conquered the galaxy through war, they had conquered it through competence. They had made themselves so valuable, so necessary, so completely essential that removing them would bring down everything they had all built together. The vote to disarm humanity had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. The aliens had learned that the most dangerous weapon in the universe was not the ability to destroy, but the ability to create and build and become so important that others could not imagine. Life without youth celebration had become a disaster, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Within just 6 hours of the big broadcast from Planet Nexus, the galactic economy began falling apart in ways that nobody had ever imagined. The collapse was not happening slowly like most economic problems. It was happening fast, like a dam breaking and flooding everything downstream. On the industrial world of Faro Prime, where massive machines dug precious metals from deep underground, the mining operations suddenly stopped working. The huge extraction machines that had been running day and night for 50 years just shut down. The safety systems that prevented dangerous cave-ins were locked behind encrypted codes that nobody could access anymore. The Faro Prime mining director was a creature called Graktun, who looked like a walking tree with silver bark and leaves that changed color based on his mood. Right now, his leaves were bright red, which meant he was very scared. He stood in the main control room, watching screen after screen show system failures. What is happening? He asked his chief engineer, whose name was Plexdot, and who had 6 arms and could work on multiple machines at the same time. Plexdot was frantically trying to restart the mining systems, but nothing was working. All the extraction equipment is using human-designed safety protocols, he said, his voice getting higher as he got more worried. The fail-safe systems that prevent the mines from collapsing are all locked up. We cannot override them without the proper access codes. How long before the mines become dangerous? Graktun asked. Plexdot looked at his diagnostic equipment and his face turned pale. If we cannot restart the safety systems within 72 hours, the pressure buildup will cause cave-ins throughout the entire mining complex. We could lose everything. Meanwhile, on the trading hub of Gorilla, Captain Dongmin was watching the chaos unfold from his ship. Lieutenant So Young was monitoring emergency broadcasts from across the galaxy, and every few minutes she had more bad news to report. Captain, the Trilaxian Shipping Consortium just lost control of their entire logistics network, she said, looking up from her communications console. Apparently their route optimization algorithms were all licensed from Earth-based companies. Without those systems, they cannot coordinate their cargo ships, and everything is getting lost in space. So Young had been working on ships for several years, but she had never seen anything like this. The breakdown was spreading faster than anyone had thought possible. Every few minutes, another major corporation or government agency would send out emergency broadcasts asking for help. The Crystalline Collective is reporting power grid failures across 3 of their major continents. She continued, the Hive Queens cannot communicate between their different colonies anymore. The Silicon Brotherhood is experiencing complete system crashes in their manufacturing centers on the agricultural world of Verdania. The situation was even worse. The planet was home to 4 billion aliens who depended on artificial atmosphere processors to keep their world livable. The original atmosphere of Verdania was poisonous to most species, so the processors had to work constantly to keep the air clean and breathable. Chief Engineer Taemin had been working on Verdania for 8 years, taking care of the human design systems that kept everyone alive. He was a quiet man who was very good at his job, but right now he was more scared than he had ever been in his life. The Verdanian governor was a tall creature with beautiful silver skin and large eyes that usually glowed with health but now looked dull with fear. How long do we have before the atmosphere becomes dangerous? He asked. Taemin looked at his diagnostic equipment and felt sick. The backup systems will keep the atmosphere stable for about 6 months, he said. But after that, the atmospheric processors will start failing one by one, and we will not be able to fix them without the human-designed maintenance protocols. The governor sat down heavily in his chair. 4 billion people, he whispered. What will we do with 4 billion people? We will have to evacuate the entire planet, Taemin said quietly, and we will have to do it in 6 months. Back on planet Nexus, the council chamber had turned into complete chaos. Representatives who had been celebrating just hours earlier were now receiving emergency messages from their homeworlds telling them that their civilizations were falling apart. The Crystalline Collective representative was pacing back and forth, his crystal body throwing rainbow light patterns across the room as he moved. Our power grids are failing across multiple continents, he said, his voice sounding like wind chimes in a hurricane. Our people are starting to panic. The Hive Queens were even more upset because their entire civilization was based on perfect communication between all their colonies. Now that communication was breaking down and they were losing control of their society. Our connection to the outer hives is completely severed, Queen Zara said, her voice shaking. We have not been cut off from our children like this for over 1,000 years. The Silicon Brotherhood was having their own problems. Their entire society was built on shared computer networks and data processing systems that were now failing one by one. Unit 7742 was making electronic sounds that indicated extreme distress. Our central processing networks are experiencing cascade failures, he said. Manufacturing has stopped on 12 worlds and we cannot restart production without human designed protocol. Senator Myung stood calmly in the center of all this chaos. She had not moved from her position since the crisis began, and her expression had not changed. She still wore the same diplomatic smile that had been confusing council investigators for weeks. When Speaker Vextai demanded that she explain what was happening, she simply said, "We told you that we were gardeners. Sometimes to plant new seeds, you have to clear away all the old growth." First, Dr. Kyung-ho activated another holographic display that showed even more detailed information about human integration into galactic society. The display showed how human technology and human knowledge had become woven into every aspect of galactic civilization over the past 2 centuries. Food production systems on 37 worlds relied on human agricultural techniques. Transportation networks used human navigation technology. Communication systems were built on human encryption protocols. Medical facilities used human diagnostic equipment and human-developed treatments. The hologram showed the cascade effect in real time as system failures spread from one world to another. When the food production systems failed on one planet, the shortage affected the trade routes to 6 other planets. When the communication networks failed in one sector, the breakdown spread to connected systems across the galaxy. Dr. Yoon-ji stepped forward to explain the technical details of what was happening. The quantum entanglement networks that allow instant communication across the galaxy, she said. Those networks require constant maintenance. Using protocols that only humans fully understand, the fusion reactors that power your cities need safety systems that were designed by human engineers. The terraforming systems that make uninhabitable worlds livable use human atmospheric science. She paused and looked around the chamber at the panicking aliens. Over 2 centuries, humans did not just participate in galactic civilization. We became the foundation that everything else was built on, and foundations cannot be removed without bringing down everything they support. The emergency broadcasts kept coming in. Each one brought news of more failures, more breakdowns, more systems shutting down across the galaxy. The aliens were beginning to understand that they had made a terrible mistake. They had not voted to disarm a dangerous enemy, they had voted to destroy the very systems that kept their civilization running. Professor Wu Jin added his own information to the growing crisis: the seed banks that preserve genetic diversity on agricultural worlds human-maintained, the weather control systems that prevent natural disasters human-operated, the water purification systems that provide clean drinking water human-designed. The numbers were staggering: 73% of all galactic trade involved human companies or human technology. 81% of all communication used human protocols. 67% of all transportation relied on human navigation systems. 92% of all medical advances in the past 50 years came from human research. As the scope of the crisis became clear, the alien representatives began to realize that they had not just attacked humanity, they had attacked themselves by trying to remove human influence from the galaxy. They had destroyed the very systems that made their own lives possible. The most terrifying part was that this was just the beginning. The cascade effect was still spreading, and with each passing hour more systems were failing. The galactic civilization that had taken thousands of years to build was coming apart in a matter of days. Captain Dongmin, watching from his ship on Kurilla, summed up the situation perfectly in a message to his crew. The aliens wanted to disarm us, he said, but they never realized that our most powerful weapon was not our ability to destroy. It was our ability to build and create and become so essential that they could not survive. Without us, the galaxy was learning a harsh lesson about the difference between strength and power. Strength was the ability to break things. Power was the ability to build things that others could not live without. And humanity had more power than anyone had ever imagined. Less than 12 hours after the economic collapse began, the Galactic Council called an emergency meeting. The representatives who had been celebrating humanity expected surrender were now facing the very real possibility that their own civilizations would fall apart within days. The emergency session was different from any meeting in galactic history. Instead of the usual formal ceremony with speeches and votes, this was a desperate scramble to save billions of lives. The Great Chamber was filled with panic as aliens tried to contact their homeworlds and coordinate disaster relief efforts. Ambassador Xiaohuan Wu entered the chamber with a completely different group of humans. This time these were not diplomats or politicians, these were the people who actually kept galactic civilization running. Dr. Unji was there with her knowledge of communication systems. Professor Wu Jin brought his expertise in agricultural systems. Dr. Kang Ho came with his understanding of economic networks. Each human carried thick folders full of data and technical specifications. They were prepared to discuss exactly how much the galaxy depended on human knowledge and human technology. The aliens were about to get a very detailed education in just how much trouble they were in. The situation is quite simple, Ambassador, Haiyan Wu said as he took his place at the center of the chamber. You wanted to disarm us because you saw us as a threat, but you never bothered to understand what we actually contribute to this galaxy. Speaker Vextai stood on his platform, but he no longer looked as confident as he had the day before. His forearms were shaking and his voice was not as strong as usual. You are holding entire civilizations hostage, he said. This is exactly the kind of violent behavior we tried to prevent. No, replied Dr. Yunji, her voice calm and professional. This is what happens when you try to remove a keystone species from an ecosystem. We did not design these systems to be weapons. We designed them to be beneficial to everyone, but when you demanded that we give up our power, you forced us to show you what losing that power actually means. The holographic displays that filled the chamber now showed the spreading disaster in real-time transportation. Networks were shutting down across 17 star systems. Communication failures were isolating entire worlds. Food production was dropping on planets that fed billions of people. Medical facilities were losing access to treatments that kept people alive. Representative Coulter from the Silicon Brotherhood was the first to ask the question that everyone was thinking. His mechanical voice was quieter than usual and filled with electronic distress. "What are your terms for restoring these systems, Minister?" J1, who had traveled from Earth as fast as possible, stepped forward. He was an experienced negotiator who had spent his career making deals between different groups, and he understood that this was the most important negotiation in galactic history. "Our terms are simple," he said. "First, we want to be treated as equals in this galaxy, not as a problem that needs to be managed. We want the same rights and respect that you give to every other species. Second, we want representation in the Council that reflects our actual contribution to galactic civilization. If humans are responsible for 73% of galactic trade and 81% of galactic communication, then we should have a voice in decisions that reflects that contribution. Third, we want binding legal agreements that this kind of discriminatory action will never be attempted again. No species should be able to vote to disarm another species just because they are afraid of them." The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. Species that had dismissed humanity as primitive and violent now had to admit that human knowledge and human technology had become essential to their survival. Dr. Kyung-ho presented a comprehensive analysis of human contributions to galactic civilization that was so detailed and so overwhelming that many aliens could not believe what they were hearing. "Transportation systems," he said, reading from his data, "every major shipping route in the galaxy uses human-developed navigation technology. Every cargo ship relies on human-designed safety protocols. Every space station depends on human atmospheric controls communication networks. Every quantum encryption system uses human mathematics. Every long-distance communication relay was built using human engineering. Every emergency broadcast system depends on human-designed protocols." Medical technology. Every major medical breakthrough in the past 50 years came from human research. Every life support system in every hospital uses human-designed components. Every disease treatment program was developed by human scientists. Agricultural systems. Every high-yield crop variety was developed using human genetic research. Every weather control system uses human atmospheric science. Every soil enhancement technique came from human agricultural studies. The list went on, covering every aspect of galactic civilization. The aliens began to understand that over 2 centuries humans had not just joined galactic society, they had become the foundation that everything else was built on. The Crystalline Collective was the first to formally apologize. Their representative stood up and said in a voice that sounded like singing crystal, "We were wrong to fear you. We should have recognized your contributions to our civilization. We formally request that you restore our power systems, and we agree to your terms." One by one, the other species began to make similar requests. The Hive Queens admitted that they could not survive without human communication technology. The Silicon Brotherhood acknowledged that their manufacturing systems would collapse without human-designed protocols, but the negotiations were not easy. Many species were proud and did not want to admit that they had made such a terrible mistake. Some tried to argue that humans were still dangerous and that there must be some way to control them without destroying galactic civilization. Professor Wu Jin addressed these concerns directly. "You are still thinking about this the wrong way," he said. "You think that our strength comes from our weapons, but that is not true. Our strength comes from our knowledge and our willingness to share that knowledge with others." He activated a holographic display that showed the history of human integration into galactic society over 2 centuries. "We have freely shared our technology, our knowledge, our innovations with every species in the galaxy. We have never used our knowledge as a weapon against anyone. We have only used it to help build a better civilization for everyone." Dr. Yunji added her own perspective. "Every system that is failing right now was designed to benefit the species that uses it. We did not build secret backdoors or hidden controls. We simply created systems that work so well that you became dependent on the Negotiations continued for hours as each species had to decide whether to accept the new reality or continue to live with the chaos that was spreading across the galaxy. Some species tried to hold out, hoping that they could find alternative solutions to their problems, but as the hours passed and the crisis got worse, it became clear that there was no alternative. The human integration into galactic civilization was so complete and so essential that trying to remove it would mean the end of everything they had built together. Queen Zara of the Hive species finally spoke for many of the holdout species. "We have no choice," she said. "Our civilization is collapsing without human technology. We must accept your terms." The final agreement was signed by all 47 species in the galaxy. It established humans as a cornerstone civilization with permanent representation on the Council Executive Committee. It gave Earth voting rights proportional to human contributions to galactic civilization, and it created binding legal protections to prevent any species from being discriminated against based on fear alone. As the agreements were signed and the human systems began coming back online across the galaxy, one thing became very clear. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted permanently. Humans were no longer just another species trying to fit in. They were now recognized as essential partners in galactic civilization. Minister J1 made the final statement of the negotiations. "We never wanted to be your masters," he said. "We wanted to be your partners, but partnership requires mutual respect, and sometimes respect must be earned through demonstration." The crisis was over, but the galaxy would never be the same. The aliens had learned that the most dangerous enemy was not the one with the biggest weapons, but the one you could not live without, and humanity had proven that their greatest strength was not their ability to destroy, but their ability to create and build and become indispensable. The vote to disarm humanity had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Instead of making humans powerless, it had revealed just how much power they actually had, and that power was now officially recognized by every species in the galaxy. 3 weeks after the crisis that almost destroyed galactic civilization, the Galactic Council voted unanimously to do something that had never been done before. They officially recognized Earth as a cornerstone civilization and gave humans permanent seats on the Council Executive Committee, the Great Chamber on planet Nexus looked very different now. The celebration banners from the failed disarmament ceremony had been replaced with new decorations that honored all the species that kept galactic civilization running. The seating arrangements had been changed too. Instead of humans sitting in a small section by themselves, they now had seats right at the center of the chamber where the most important decisions were made. Ambassador Haiyan Wu stood once again in the middle of the chamber, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. The fear and hostility that had filled the room just weeks earlier had been replaced by something that looked like respect mixed with a healthy amount of nervousness. "We never wanted to be your masters," Haiyan Wu said in his closing speech to the assembled representatives. "We wanted to be your partners, but real partnership requires mutual respect, and sometimes respect has to be earned through demonstration." The restoration of human-operated systems began immediately, but it came with new conditions that changed everything about how the galaxy worked. Human engineers now had permanent positions on every infrastructure oversight committee. Human economists advised on all major trade policies. Human diplomats mediated disputes between species that had histories of conflict. Captain Dongmin found himself promoted from independent trader to director of human commercial operations. His job was to coordinate the massive effort to bring all the galaxy systems back online. It was a huge responsibility, but he was good at managing complex operations. Lieutenant So Young, who had been promoted to his deputy, was working on restoring the communication networks that connected distant worlds. "It is strange," she said to Dongmin as they worked in the command center that had been set up on planet Nexus. "They wanted to disarm us, but all they did was show the galaxy how well armed we really were." Dongmin smiled as he looked at the displays showing systems coming back online across the galaxy. "Our weapons were never our missiles or our ships," he said. "Our weapons were our knowledge and our ability to make ourselves useful to everyone around us on Earth." Director J1 addressed the planet in a historic broadcast that was transmitted to every human world and every human settlement throughout the galaxy. "Today we did not just defend our right to exist as free people," he said. We demonstrated that true strength does not come from the ability to destroy, but from the ability to build and create, and become so valuable that others cannot imagine existing without. Youth Crisis had transformed the political landscape of the galaxy in ways that nobody had expected. The old system, where stronger species dominated weaker ones, was completely gone now. Every species understood that civilization was like a complex machine where every part was important, and removing any part could break the whole thing. Dr. Kyung-ho, who was now serving as the galaxy's first human economic advisor, was working from a new office in the council building. His job was to make sure that the economic networks that connected all the worlds would never be so fragile again. The report he wrote for the council explained the new reality in simple terms. Humans did not conquer the galaxy through war, he wrote. We conquered it through competence. We made ourselves the foundation that galactic civilization rests on, and foundations, by their very nature, cannot be removed without bringing down everything they support. Changes were happening everywhere on the industrial world of Pharaoh Prime. The mining operations were not just restored, but completely redesigned. Human engineers worked alongside the local workers to create new systems that were more efficient and safer than before. Chief Engineer Taemin, who had been so worried about the atmospheric processors on Verdania, was now leading a team that was building backup systems on 12 different worlds. The new systems were designed with something that had been missing before: redundancy. If one part failed, there would always be backup systems ready to take over. The galaxy had learned that depending too much on any one thing was dangerous, even when that thing was as reliable as human technology. On the trading world of Corilla, the Nexus Bar had become a meeting place where aliens and humans worked together on new projects. Trader Zeklon, who had once said that humans were smart to surrender, was now partnering with human companies to develop new shipping routes that would be faster and more reliable than anything that had existed before. Senator Mi Young was no longer just Earth's secondary representative. She was now the first human ambassador to the Galactic Council, with full voting rights and the authority to speak for all human interests in the galaxy. Her diplomatic smile was the same, but now everyone understood that behind that smile was the knowledge that humans had become indispensable. The legal frameworks that governed galactic civilization had been completely rewritten. The new laws made it illegal for any species to be discriminated against based on fear alone. They also created protections for species that provided essential services to galactic civilization. The laws were designed to prevent anyone from ever again making the mistake of trying to disarm the people who kept everything running. Professor Wujin established the new Galactic Agricultural Institute, where scientists from all species worked together to develop better farming techniques and food production systems. The institute was headquartered on Earth, but it had research stations on 37 different worlds. Dr. Yunji became the head of the new Galactic Communication Authority, which was responsible for maintaining and improving the networks that allowed instant communication across the galaxy. Her first project was to train engineers from every species in the galaxy, so that the knowledge of how to maintain these systems would be shared by everyone. The most important change was in how different species thought about each other. Before the crisis, many aliens had seen humans as dangerous newcomers who needed to be controlled. Now they understood that humans were partners who had been quietly making everyone live better for over 2 centuries. The emergency protocols that had been activated during the crisis became the foundation for a new kind of galactic government. Instead of each species governing their own worlds independently, there was now an integrated system where all species worked together on problems that affected everyone. When natural disasters struck alien worlds, human emergency response teams were among the first to arrive. When new technologies were developed, they were immediately shared with all species who could benefit from them. When diplomatic disputes arose, human mediators helped find solutions that worked for everyone involved. Captain Dongmin often thought about how much had changed as he traveled between worlds in his new role. His ship, the Lucky Star, was now equipped with the most advanced technology in the galaxy, and he had a crew that included members from 6 different species. The galaxy is a different place now, he told So Young as they watched a convoy of ships carrying supplies to a world that was recovering. From the crisis 3 weeks ago, these species would barely talk to each other. Now they are working together like they have been partners for Centauri. So Young, who was now in charge of coordinating supply runs to dozens of worlds, nodded as she watched the efficient cooperation between different species. The crisis taught everyone that we are stronger together than we are apart. She said the transformation was not just political and economic, it was cultural too. Alien children were learning about human history and human achievements in their schools. Human children were learning alien languages and alien customs. Exchange programs allowed young people from different species to live and study on each other's worlds. The Crystalline Collective, who had been among the most vocal critics of human violence, now sponsored art exhibitions that celebrated human creativity. The Hive Queens established cultural centers on human worlds where aliens could learn about human music and literature and philosophy. The Silicon Brotherhood collaborated with human engineers to develop new technologies that benefited everyone. 5 years after the crisis, a new holiday was established called Partnership Day. It was celebrated on every world in the galaxy to remember the moment when different species learned to work together instead of against each other. The holiday featured festivals where aliens and humans shared food and stories and celebrated the diversity that made galactic civilization strong. Ambassador Hyun-woo, who was now Elder Ambassador for Human Affairs, often spoke at Partnership Day celebrations. His message was always the same. The crisis taught us that our differences are not weaknesses to be feared, but strengths to be celebrated. When we work together, there is no problem we cannot solve, no challenge we cannot overcome. The Council Senate had tried to disarm humans, but Earth's response had left them speechless. Not because of the weapons humans possessed, but because of the weapons they did not need in a galaxy full of species that had evolved to fight humans, had evolved to build, and in the end the builders had proven far more powerful than the warriors. The galaxy had learned the most important lesson in the history of civilization. The most dangerous species was not the one with the biggest guns, but the one that others could not live without. And humanity had become that species. No.